The steering wheel was damp. Not wet. Damp. Like someone had wiped it down hours ago, and the moisture had not fully dried. County Sheriff Dalton ran his gloved hand across the surface and felt the slick residue. The truck had been sitting in a snowbank for 8 years. Everything inside should have been frozen or bone dry. But the wheel was damp, fresh. The Peterbilt had been found by a road crew clearing debris after the spring thaw. The truck was parked on a Forest Service road 20 miles north of Interstate 80 in Wyoming. Snow had buried it for years. The crew had almost missed it, but the sun had melted enough snow to expose the cab roof. One worker noticed the faded paint. They dug out the truck and called the sheriff. Dalton arrived with a forensic team. The truck was old, maybe 15 years. The paint had peeled. The tires were flat. But the cab was intact. The driver's door was unlocked. Dalton opened it carefully. The interior smelled like mildew and something sharper, cleaning solution. He climbed inside and looked around. The logbook was on the passenger seat. The pages were warped from humidity. He opened it. The last entry was dated January 14, 2017. The name at the top was Carl Jennings. Dalton radioed dispatch and ran the name. Carl Jennings had been reported missing in January 2017. He had been hauling a load of construction materials from Montana to Colorado. His last known contact was a radio call to another driver. Carl had said he was caught in a winter storm. The signal had cut out. Search teams had checked the route. They found nothing. The case went cold. The forensic team photographed the cab. They dusted for fingerprints. Most of the prints matched Carl's CDL records, but there were prints on the door handle that did not match. The prints were clear, recent. Someone had opened the door within the last few weeks. Dalton asked the road crew if anyone had touched the truck. They said no. They had only cleared snow. They had not opened the door. Dalton examined the steering wheel again. He took a sample of the moisture. The lab would test it. He moved to the dashboard. The CB radio was still mounted. He turned the dial. Static. He checked the wiring. The radio was functional, but the antenna had been disconnected, not broken. Cleanly removed. Dalton stepped outside and looked at the roof. The antenna mount was empty. The antenna itself was lying in the snow 15 feet away. Someone had taken it off. The forensic team opened the trailer. It was empty. The load was gone. Dalton checked the manifest. Carl had been hauling steel beams and concrete panels, heavy materials, the kind that required a forklift to unload, but there was no forklift nearby, no tire tracks. The Forest Service road was narrow. Only one vehicle could pass at a time. Dalton walked the road for half a mile in both directions. No other tracks. No signs of another truck. He returned to the cab and searched more carefully. Under the driver's seat, he found a plastic water bottle. The bottle was half full. The water inside was clear, not frozen. Dalton unscrewed the cap and smelled it. No odor. He capped it and bagged it as evidence. He also found a granola bar wrapper on the floor. The wrapper was clean. No dirt, no mold. It looked fresh. The forensic team tested the water bottle. The lab found trace amounts of sedative, a mild one, the kind used to help people sleep. The concentration was low, not enough to cause harm, but enough to make someone drowsy. Dalton wondered if Carl had taken it voluntarily, or if someone had drugged him. Dalton contacted the freight company Carl had worked for. The company had dissolved in 2019. But Dalton tracked down the former dispatcher. The dispatcher remembered Carl. He said Carl had been a reliable driver. He had worked for the company for 12 years. On January 14, 2017, Carl had checked in at 3:47 p.m. He said he was passing through Rawlins, Wyoming. He was heading south on a state route to avoid heavy traffic on the interstate. The dispatcher had approved the route. Carl said he would check in again when he reached the Colorado border. He never did. The dispatcher said, Carl had mentioned the weather. A storm was moving in. Carl wanted to find a place to park for the night. The dispatcher told him to stop at the next truck stop. Carl said he would. That was the last conversation. An hour later, another driver radioed dispatch. He said he had heard Carl on the CB. Carl sounded distressed. He said he was stuck. The road was icing over. The signal cut out before Carl could give his location. Dalton asked if the other driver remembered anything else. The dispatcher gave him the driver's name. Thomas Wade. Dalton tracked him down. Thomas was retired. He lived in Montana. Dalton called him. Thomas said he remembered that night clearly. He had been driving south on the same route, about 30 miles behind Carl. The storm had been brutal. Winds gusting to 50 miles per hour. Visibility near zero. Thomas had heard Carl on the CB around 5:15 p.m. Carl said his truck was sliding. He was trying to find a safe place to pull over. Then the signal died. Thomas tried calling back. No response. He drove slowly for another hour. He never saw Carl's truck. He assumed Carl had found a side road and parked. Dalton asked if Thomas had seen any other vehicles. Thomas said no. The road had been empty. Most drivers had avoided the route because of the storm. Dalton asked if Thomas had noticed anything unusual. Thomas paused. Then he said there had been one thing. Around 6 p.m., he had passed a Forest Service road. The entrance was barely visible in the snow, but Thomas thought he saw tire tracks turning onto it. Fresh tracks. He had not stopped to check. The storm was too dangerous. He kept driving. Dalton checked the map. The Forest Service road Thomas described matched the location where the truck was found. Dalton asked if Thomas remembered the exact mile marker. Thomas said no, but he thought it was near mile marker 47 on State Route 130. Dalton confirmed. The Forest Service road was at mile marker 48. Close enough. Dalton returned to the truck. He examined the tires. The tread was worn, but still visible. He checked the tracks in the snow near the truck. The tracks had been covered by 8 years of accumulation, but the spring thaw had revealed faint impressions. The tracks showed the truck had driven onto the Forest Service road, then stopped, but there were other tracks too, smaller, like a pickup truck or SUV. The tracks overlapped with the semi's tracks. Someone else had been there. The forensic team took casts of the smaller tracks. The tread pattern matched a common all-terrain tire, the kind used on trucks and SUVs across the region. Not unique, but it confirmed someone else had been at the scene. Dalton wondered if that person had helped Carl, or if they had done something worse. Dalton checked Carl's cell phone records. Carl's phone had been active until 5:23 p.m. on January 14th. The last call he made was to his wife. The call lasted 2 minutes, then the phone went offline. Dalton contacted Carl's wife. She had remarried, but she remembered the call. She said Carl sounded tired. He told her he was caught in a storm. He said he was going to pull over and wait it out. He would call her in the morning. She never heard from him again. Dalton asked if Carl had seemed scared. She said no, just tired. She asked if he had mentioned anyone else on the road. She said he had not. Dalton thanked her and hung up. He reviewed the timeline. Carl had radioed Thomas at 5:15 p.m. He had called his wife at 5:21 p.m. His phone went offline at 5:23 p.m. That was an 8-minute window. Something had happened in those 8 minutes. The forensic team tested the phone. It was dead. The battery had corroded, but they extracted the SIM card and sent it to a lab. The lab recovered some data, text messages, photos. The last text Carl sent was at 5:20 p.m. It was to his brother. The message read, "Road bad, pulling off. Talk tomorrow." The message was sent, but there was no reply. Dalton contacted Carl's brother. The brother confirmed he had received the message. He had not thought much of it. Carl often drove in bad weather. The brother assumed Carl was fine. Dalton asked if the brother had tried calling Carl the next day. The brother said yes. The call went straight to voicemail. The brother tried several times over the next week. No answer. Eventually the brother filed a missing person report. The police investigated, but the trail went cold. The brother said the family had assumed Carl died in the storm. His body was never found. They held a memorial service. They moved on. Dalton reviewed the photos on Carl's phone. Most were pictures of the road, landscapes, sunsets. But one photo stood out. It was taken at 5:18 p.m. on January 14th. The photo showed the view through the windshield. Snow covered the road. The headlights illuminated a narrow path, but in the distance there was a shape, a vehicle. It was blurry, but it looked like a pickup truck, parked on the shoulder. Dalton zoomed in. He could not make out the license plate, but the truck was dark-colored, maybe blue or black. Dalton showed the photo to Thomas Wade. Thomas said he did not remember seeing a parked truck, but the visibility had been so poor he could have missed it. Dalton asked if Thomas drove a pickup. Thomas said no, he drove a semi. Dalton thanked him. The forensic team tested the granola bar wrapper. The wrapper had fingerprints. 2 sets. One matched Carl, the other did not. Dalton ran the second set through the database. No match. The prints did not belong to anyone with a criminal record. Dalton wondered if the prints belonged to the person who had opened the door recently, or if they were older, from 2017. Dalton contacted local residents. The Forest Service road was remote. Only a few cabins were nearby. Most were seasonal, used by hunters in the fall. Dalton visited each cabin. Most were empty, but one cabin was occupied. An older man lived there year-round. His name was Eugene Cross. Dalton knocked on the door. Eugene answered. He was in his 70s. He said he had lived in the cabin for 20 years. Dalton asked if Eugene remembered January 2017. Eugene said he did. The winter had been harsh. Eugene had been snowed in for weeks. He had not left the cabin until March. Dalton asked if Eugene had seen or heard anything unusual. Eugene said no. But he mentioned something else. In late April 2017, after the snow melted, Eugene had walked the Forest Service road. He did it every spring to check for damage. That year he found something. A semi-truck, parked about a mile from his cabin. The truck looked abandoned. Eugene had walked around it. The doors were locked. He looked in the windows. The cab was empty. No driver, no personal items. Eugene thought it was strange, but he did not report it. He assumed the driver had been rescued. Dalton asked if Eugene had touched the truck. Eugene said no, he had not wanted to interfere. Dalton asked if Eugene had seen anyone else on the road. Eugene said no, the road was rarely used. Dalton asked if Eugene had noticed any other vehicles. Eugene said he had seen tire tracks, small ones, like a pickup. The tracks led to the semi, and then turned around. Eugene assumed someone had checked on the truck and left. Dalton asked if Eugene had seen the truck again after April 2017. Eugene said yes. He walked the road every spring. The truck was always there. Over the years snow buried it, but every spring Eugene could see the cab roof. He never thought to report it. He figured someone knew it was there. Dalton asked if Eugene had seen anyone near the truck in recent weeks. Eugene said no, but he admitted he had not walked that far this spring. His knees were bad. Dalton returned to the truck. He examined the locks. The driver's door lock was broken. It looked forced. Someone had pried it open. Dalton checked the passenger door. The lock was intact. Whoever had opened the driver's door had not used a key. Dalton took photos of the damage. He wondered if the person who opened the door was the same person who left the fresh fingerprints. The forensic team tested the cleaning solution smell. They swabbed the dashboard and the steering wheel. The lab identified the chemical. It was a common disinfectant, the kind sold at any grocery store, but the concentration was higher than normal. Someone had used a lot of it. Dalton wondered why someone would clean the cab, especially after 8 years. Dalton contacted the Wyoming State Patrol. He asked if they had any reports of stolen vehicles or suspicious activity on State Route 130 in recent weeks. The patrol checked their records. One report stood out. On March 22, 2025, a hunter had reported seeing someone near the Forest Service Road. The hunter said he had been driving past the entrance when he saw a dark blue pickup parked there. A man was walking toward the forest. The hunter did not stop. He thought the man was hiking, but the hunter remembered it because the weather had been cold, not ideal for hiking. Dalton asked for a description of the man. The hunter said he was average height, wore a heavy jacket and a beanie. The hunter could not see his face. Dalton asked if the hunter remembered the pickup's license plate. The hunter said no, but he thought the truck was a Ford, maybe 10 years old. Dalton thanked him. Dalton ran a search for dark blue Ford pickups registered in Wyoming. The list was long, over 3,000 vehicles. Dalton narrowed the search. He focused on trucks registered to individuals with connections to Carl Jennings. He found one match, a blue Ford F-150 registered to a man named Derek Moss. Derek had worked for the same freight company as Carl. They had both been drivers. Dalton contacted Derek. Derek agreed to meet. Dalton asked if Derek remembered Carl Jennings. Derek said he did. They had been friends. They often met at truck stops to catch up. Dalton asked if Derek knew Carl had gone missing. Derek said yes. He had been devastated. Carl was like a brother to him. Dalton asked if Derek had tried to find Carl. Derek said he had. He had driven the route Carl was supposed to take. He searched for weeks. He never found anything. Dalton asked if Derek had been to the Forest Service Road recently. Derek hesitated. Then he admitted he had. He said he had been thinking about Carl a lot lately. He decided to drive the route again, see if he could find any clues. On March 22nd, he turned onto the Forest Service Road. He saw the truck. He recognized it immediately. It was Carl's Peterbilt. Derek said he had been shocked. He parked his pickup and walked to the truck. The door was locked. He pried it open. He climbed inside. Dalton asked what Derek had done inside the cab. Derek said he had looked around. He wanted to see if there were any signs of what happened to Carl. He found the logbook. He found the water bottle. He touched the steering wheel. He sat in the driver's seat. He cried. Then he realized the cab was dirty. He decided to clean it. He wanted Carl to be remembered the way he lived, not in a dirty, abandoned truck. Derek went back to his pickup and got cleaning supplies. He wiped down the steering wheel. He cleaned the dashboard. He threw away the trash, except for the granola bar wrapper. He had not noticed it. Dalton asked why Derek had not reported finding the truck. Derek said he had planned to, but then he thought about Carl's family. They had moved on. Reporting the truck would bring everything back. The pain, the questions. Derek decided to leave it alone. He figured the road crew would find it eventually. Dalton asked if Derek had taken anything from the truck. Derek said no, he had only cleaned it. Dalton asked about the water bottle. Derek said he had seen it. He did not touch it. Dalton asked if Derek had seen the sedative residue. Derek said no, he did not know the water was drugged. Dalton asked if Derek knew who might have drugged Carl. Derek said he did not, but he mentioned something else. In late 2016, Carl had been stressed. He told Derek that someone from the freight company was pressuring him. Carl did not give details, but he said he felt watched. Derek had told Carl to report it. Carl said he would, but Derek did not know if Carl ever did. Dalton contacted the freight company's former employees. He asked if anyone remembered issues with Carl. One former dispatcher recalled an incident. In December 2016, Carl had complained about another driver. The driver had been following him. Carl said the driver showed up at the same truck stops, the same rest areas. Carl thought it was a coincidence at first, but it kept happening. The dispatcher told Carl to document it. Carl said he would, but the dispatcher never heard back. Dalton asked for the other driver's name. The dispatcher did not remember, but she suggested checking the company's old route logs. Dalton obtained the logs from storage. He cross-referenced Carl's routes with other drivers. One name appeared frequently: Marcus Hale. Marcus and Carl had driven similar routes. They stopped at the same locations, often on the same days. Dalton tracked Marcus down. Marcus was still driving. He worked for a different company now. Dalton called him. Marcus said he remembered Carl. They had crossed paths many times. But Marcus denied following him. He said it was just coincidence. Their routes overlapped. Dalton asked if Marcus had ever been to the Forest Service Road. Marcus said no. He did not know where it was. Dalton asked if Marcus had seen Carl on January 14, 2017. Marcus said no. He had been in Montana that day. Dalton checked Marcus's route logs. Marcus had been scheduled to drive from Billings to Denver on January 14th. The route took him through Wyoming, near State Route 130. Dalton pressed harder. He asked if Marcus had stopped on the route. Marcus said he had. He pulled over during the storm. He waited at a rest area for a few hours. Then he continued. He did not see Carl. Dalton asked, "Which rest area?" Marcus said it was near Laramie. Dalton checked the distance. The rest area was 40 miles south of the Forest Service Road. Marcus could have driven past the road. Dalton asked if Marcus drove a pickup. Marcus said yes, a blue Ford. Dalton felt his pulse quicken. He asked Marcus to describe the truck. Marcus said it was a 2015 F-150, dark blue. Dalton asked if Marcus still owned it. Marcus said no, he had sold it in 2018. Dalton asked who Marcus sold it to. Marcus said he sold it to a dealer. He did not remember which one. Dalton thanked him and hung up. He ran a title search. The truck had been sold to a dealer in Cheyenne. The dealer sold it to another individual in 2019. That individual sold it to Derek Moss in 2021. Dalton realized Derek had been driving Marcus's old truck. Dalton called Derek again. He asked if Derek knew the truck used to belong to Marcus. Derek said he did not. He had bought it used. Dalton asked if Derek had found anything unusual in the truck when he bought it. Derek said no, it was clean. Dalton asked if Derek knew Marcus. Derek said he did. They had worked for the same company, but they were not friends. Marcus kept to himself. Dalton returned to the evidence. He had the fingerprints from the granola bar wrapper. He compared them to Marcus's prints from his CDL records. No match. Dalton was at another dead end. He reviewed the timeline again. Carl had driven onto the Forest Service Road around 5:20 p.m. His phone went offline at 5:23 p.m. Someone had been there, someone in a blue pickup, but Dalton could not prove it was Marcus. And even if it was, what had Marcus done? Dalton examined the water bottle again. The sedative was mild. It would not kill someone, but combined with the cold and isolation, it could be dangerous. If Carl drank the water and fell asleep, he could have frozen to death. But the cab showed no signs of Carl's body. No remains, no clothing. Where had he gone? The forensic team searched the area around the truck. They used cadaver dogs. The dogs found nothing. Dalton expanded the search. They checked every cabin within 10 miles. No sign of Carl. Dalton wondered if Carl had walked away from the truck. Maybe he was disoriented from the sedative. Maybe he got lost in the storm. But that did not explain the missing load, or the cleaned cab, or the disconnected antenna. Dalton interviewed Eugene Cross again. He asked if Eugene had ever seen anyone living near the Forest Service Road. Eugene said no, but he mentioned something. In the summer of 2017 he had seen smoke, like a campfire. It was coming from deeper in the forest. Eugene had walked toward it. He found a small clearing. Someone had been camping there, but they were gone. Eugene found a sleeping bag and some canned food. He left it alone. He figured a hiker had forgotten it. Dalton asked Eugene to show him the clearing. Eugene agreed. They walked 2 miles into the forest. The clearing was overgrown now, but Dalton could see where a tent had been. He searched the area. He found a rusted can opener, a torn piece of fabric, and a boot print in dried mud. The print was old, but it was clear. Dalton took a cast. The print matched a common work boot, size 11, Carl's boot size. Dalton concluded that Carl had survived the initial night. He had walked away from the truck. Maybe he was trying to find help, but the storm had been too severe. He got lost. He set up camp in the clearing. He stayed there for days, maybe weeks. Eventually he ran out of supplies. Dalton wondered if Carl was still alive, if he had walked out of the forest and started a new life, like James Rucker, or if he had died in the clearing and animals had scattered his remains. Dalton issued a public appeal. He described Carl. He asked anyone who had seen him to come forward. 3 months passed. No tips. Then a letter arrived. It was postmarked from Oregon. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. "I'm alive. I'm sorry." The handwriting matched Carl's signature from his CDL. Dalton tried to trace the letter. The postmark was from Portland, but the letter had been mailed from a drop box. No cameras nearby. Dalton contacted the Portland police. They checked local shelters and clinics. No one matching Carl's description. Dalton released the letter to the media. He hoped someone would recognize Carl. 2 weeks later, a man called. He said he had seen someone who looked like Carl at a soup kitchen in Eugene, Oregon. The man said Carl went by a different name, but the face matched. Dalton flew to Oregon. He visited the soup kitchen. The staff confirmed a man matching Carl's description came in regularly, but he had not been there in weeks. Dalton asked where the man stayed. The staff said he slept in his car, an old sedan. They did not know the make or model. Dalton checked parking lots near the soup kitchen. He found an old Honda Civic. The windows were tinted. Dalton looked inside. The back seat was full of blankets and clothes. On the dashboard was a faded photo. The photo showed Carl and his wife, smiling. Dalton waited. Hours passed. As the sun set, a man approached the car. He was thin. His hair was long and gray, but it was Carl. Dalton stepped forward. Carl saw him and froze. Dalton said his name. Carl did not run. He just stood there. Dalton asked if they could talk. Carl nodded. They sat in a diner. Carl ordered coffee. Dalton asked what happened. Carl said he had been driving through the storm. He saw the pickup parked on the shoulder. He thought someone needed help. He pulled over. A man got out of the pickup. The man said his truck was stuck. Carl offered to call for help. The man said no. He had a phone. He just needed a tow. Carl said he could not help. His semi was too big. The man thanked him and walked back to his truck. Carl started to drive away, but his truck slid on the ice. He turned onto the Forest Service road to regain control. He stopped to check his tires. The man from the pickup followed him. The man said he had water. Carl was thirsty. He took the bottle. He drank. Minutes later he felt dizzy. He climbed into the sleeper berth to rest. When he woke up it was dark. The man was gone. So was the load. Carl said he tried to start the truck. The battery was dead. He tried his phone. No signal. He realized he was trapped. He waited for someone to find him. No one came. Days passed. He rationed the food he had in the cab. A few granola bars, some jerky. On the 4th day he decided to walk. He followed the road, but the snow was deep. He got lost. He found the clearing. He set up camp. He survived on melted snow and whatever he could find. After 2 weeks he walked out of the forest. He reached a highway. He hitchhiked to Idaho. He did not go home. He was ashamed. He had lost the load. He thought he would be blamed. He thought his family would be better off thinking he was dead. Dalton asked why Carl had sent the letter. Carl said he had been watching the news. He saw the story about the truck being found. He saw Derek's interview. Derek said Carl was a good man. Carl realized people still cared. He wanted them to know he was alive. But he was not ready to come home. Dalton asked if Carl would ever come home. Carl said he did not know. Maybe someday. Dalton asked about the man in the pickup. Carl said he never saw his face clearly. The man wore a hood, but Carl thought the man had been following him. For weeks, Carl said he had noticed the same pickup at truck stops. He thought it was paranoia, but now he knew it was real. Dalton asked if Carl thought the man was Marcus. Carl said he did not know. He never learned the man's name. Dalton returned to Wyoming. He reviewed the case one more time. He had no proof Marcus was involved. The fingerprints did not match. The tire tracks were generic. The pickup had changed hands multiple times. Dalton contacted Marcus again. He told him what Carl had said. Marcus denied everything. He said Carl was confused. The sedative had affected his memory. Dalton did not believe him, but without evidence he could not charge Marcus. The case remained open. Carl stayed in Oregon. His family learned he was alive. Some of them wanted to see him, others were angry. His wife said she had moved on. She wished him well but did not want contact. Carl accepted it. He lived quietly. He worked odd jobs. He attended support groups for people who had disappeared and returned. Dalton retired a year later. He never solved the case. But he kept Carl's photo on his desk. A reminder that some people vanish, not because they died, but because they chose to stay gone. And sometimes the silence they leave behind says more than any answer could.